तमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ओम शांति शांति शांति। हरि ओम श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः। हरि ओम। समस्त जन कल्याणे निरतं करुणामयं नमामि चिन्मयं देवं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरम्। वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुम्। Salutations to one and all. So our topic for today is Karma to Karma Yoga. So this word Karma Yoga is very, very famous, common. A lot of people use this word also. Some also tell us that Swamiji, I come to the satsang. My husband does not come to satsang, but he is a real Karma Yogi. So what do we exactly mean by Karma Yoga, first of all? Anyone? Selfless action without doership. Okay, we will explore what exactly Karma Yoga is based on the Gita and the other texts of Vedanta. So action is called as karma and dedicated action is called as Karma Yoga. Yoga literally means to unite. So any action when it is dedicated to a higher purpose, higher altar, which helps us to unite. Unite with what? One is it helps us to unite the mind and the intellect together. Because generally our mind and intellect are not integrated. As we see in the example of Arjuna also. That he knew what is to be done. But his emotions overwhelmed him so much that suddenly there was a conflict now. He did not want to follow what he knew. So in knowing and doing there becomes a conflict. Why? Because the mind and intellect is not integrated. So many of us know that anger is not good. We know it. But still anger happens. We lose control. Why? Because mind and intellect is not integrated. So that split in the personality, to bridge that gap, Karma Yoga is very, very crucial. Because what is creating that gap is our own past impressions, past habits. And the source of that is selfishness. In simple terms, without any technicalities, if we have to understand, there are 6 impurities of the mind: Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya. All these 6, in all these 6, the first one is the most crucial. Kama or selfishness. Because on that depends all the other 5. If I have Kama, then only Krodha will happen. And I insist on getting something, and when I don't get it, that obstacle which comes, then I get angry. If I get something, I may want to repeat again and again. I may want it again and again, or I want to preserve that. I am scared of losing that. So either greed or fear. Then moha, delusion. Till Arjuna thought of himself as a soldier, he was very clear. The moment he started thinking of himself as a grandson, as a student, and from the larger picture he came down to the smaller picture, got deluded. and started giving so many arguments that why he should not fight the war. Why? Because karma. Intoxication, mother, that is also because of karma. We get intoxicated with the wealth, intoxicated with power, intoxicated with youth. Different things intoxicate the mind. All based on karma. And matsarya, jealousy, also based on karma. So as long as karma or selfishness is there in our heart, mind and intellect will not be united and there will be a split in the personality. And such a person who has a split personality, however hard that person tries to meditate, it will not be possible. Today it is a fashion, meditation. Don't tell us theory and philosophy, Swamiji, I want to meditate. Do you teach meditation? What is the preparation required for meditation only is not there yet. Gurudev Swami Chinmayanand always used to say that meditation is the highest vocation of life. A lot of preparation is required. So very famous quote of his is, if you sleep outside, you fall. But if you sleep inside, you rise. To sleep inside consciously, meaning to step by step withdraw the attention from the world outside, from the body, from the breath, from the mind, and focus on that which is our true nature, requires a lot of training and purity of mind. That can come only when there is karma yoga. So if there is calm, in Hindi we always say, jahan calm, there is no Ram. Jahan calm hai, wahan Ram nahi hai. So if I have to remove calm, I cannot remove desire completely all of a sudden, but I can transform it into a selfless desire. So Karma Yoga is a very important aspect of life, and the need of Karma Yoga is there for every one of us. That wherever we are, we have to transform our attitude. So we will come to that. So Karma Yoga is that which purifies us. It unites what? Unites mind and intellect. First point. Second point, it unites us to our own true potential. Because the higher the purpose, greater potential manifests. In modern management language and theories, one is taught, think big. Vedanta doesn't tell us to think big. Vedanta says that you remove this small I, that is really big thinking. Retaining this small I, how much big can I think? I can only think big in terms of numbers, targets, achievements, success. That is still finite, no? One of my favorite couplets is this. Again and again I keep saying, because I try to remind myself more than anything else. दुनिया में कमाए क्या हीरे क्या मोती, दुनिया में कमाए क्या हीरे क्या मोती, यारों ये याद रहे कफन में जेब नहीं होती. That how much ever one acquires and achieves, there is no way one will take it with oneself. वो भी गए खाली हाथ जो मुल्कों के वाली थे, सिकंदर जब गया जहाँ से तो दोनों हाथ खाली थे. So how much will you take and go? Ego which remains solid, however big the achievement may be there, still it is finite. And here in human birth we have the chance to drop this sense of finitude and achieve that which is infinite. Now tell me which is bigger. Remaining small and achieving big things, or dissolving this ego and achieving infinity. Karma Yoga is a step towards that. How to achieve that which is infinite. So it unites me to my true potential, which is infinite potential, which is not just a potential in terms of achieving a goal outside, which is also necessary. You see all the great Karma Yogis, the kind of work they have done, unimaginable kind of work. Because the foundation of that work is the purity of mind, selflessness of the resolve. This year we are celebrating 150 years of Swami Vivekananda's birth, right? Do you know when he gave the speech in the World Parliament of Religions?
1893.
Right. Year is perfect, 1893. Which date?
11 September.
Which date?
11 September.
11 September. In the whole audience, one person knows. Such a great Mahatma, what a dynamic patriot of our country. We don't know 11 September for this reason. We know 11 September for... On 11 September, he addressed the World Parliament of Religions, 1893. In 1902, he took Samadhi. Hardly 9 years. And there was no fax and telex and email and all these facilities. In 8 years' time, he actually established Ramakrishna Mission, which is more than 100 years old now and is doing such yeoman service to the society. Why? The foundation of it is selflessness. There is a documented research done in America on the world's longest standing institutions. Can you name a multinational company which is 500 years old? Anyone? 300 years old? 200, there will be a few. 100, some more. But if you see the research, it says so clearly that the world's longest standing institutions are the spiritual organizations. And the second best is the army. And in both these, what is the motivation for people in both these? They found that selflessness is the motivation in both these. So the idea is this, that people who have achieved that infinite potential, they have united with that infinite potential, don't become idlers. They really serve the society, and their service does not limit itself to their lifetime. It goes beyond many lifetimes, and it can go on for many millenniums also, because the sankalpa is so pure. Shankaracharya did not go to any ISB. Buddha never went into any IIT. Christ never went to IIM. But all these organizations are serving the society for so many years, millennium, some of them. So Karma Yoga is that which unites us with our true potential, purifies our mind. And a mind which is pure will achieve any great success in the world and also will achieve spiritual fulfillment. Both will be possible. So one is Karma Yoga unites the mind and intellect. Second is Karma Yoga unites us to our own higher potential. And finally Karma Yoga unites us with the Lord also. Hence it is a very important step. In fact, one should say that it is the beginning. Real spiritual life starts with Karma Yoga. First we are going to see what Karma Yoga is not, before we see what is Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga is not just some special actions like social service. It can also be social service, nobody said no. But it does not mean only a special action or some social service that I go and feed the poor, I go and teach somebody, or I take care of some orphans. Because it is not in the action, it is in the intention, in the attitude. So some special action, there are many people who will not do their duty at home, but will go and do social service in some organization. And the people at home are very irritated with such people. That you are going to spiritual organization, you are going to some NGO, you are giving service there, but at home you need to help me out and you are not doing that. That is not Karma Yoga. I mean, if one is balancing it and going and doing it, especially there also, there is no problem. That it all depends on one's attitude and the intention. So it is not just a set of some special actions. It is not working for long hours in a day. That's what some people say. That I don't come to satsang, but my husband is a Karma Yogi. Why? Because he works 19 hours a day, Swamiji. Working 19 hours a day does not make a person Karma Yogi. Machine works 24 hours a day also. But just because I work so hard, I can be called maximum a workaholic. I cannot be called a Karma Yogi just because I am working. If my attitude is behind it is different and selfless and all that, then there is a different point altogether. It is not mere efficiency in action, that a Karma Yogi is one who acts very efficiently and gets things done. Karma Yogi can be efficient, no doubt. But mere efficiency is not Karma Yoga. There are some people who are very smart. Somehow they will get their work done. They don't bother about the means. And one very popular escape route that they take is, if the means is noble, if the goal is noble, the any means is justified. Our culture does not say that. The means are as important as the goal. Vijayadashmi went few days back. What do we do on Vijayadashmi day? One of the things that we do is we worship our tools. So if it is a factory, they will worship all the machinery. If the home, and the homemaker will, the gas and then all the utensils and all that. For some businessmen, it will be the office. Everybody worships the tools, including the vehicles and computers and whatnot. Why do we do that? To make us aware that the means are as sacred and important as the goal. And one common example that people give for that is, if Bhagavan Krishna could manipulate in the Mahabharat war, why cannot I do? Shri Krishna did all cunning things in the war. And because of him, Pandavas won the war. Why? Because the goal was dharmic. So any means you adopt, reach the goal. Because we don't think clearly. Bhagavan Krishna did not do anything cunning, he did not compromise with dharma. I am not here to justify Shri Krishna, I am only sharing with you my thinking. You are free to have your own opinion, no problem. When Bhishma was to be defeated, is it not dharmic on the part of an enemy to find out, a part of a soldier, to find out the weakness of the enemy and use that strategy? So if Arjun kept Shikhandi in front of him, is it dharmic or adharmic? There is nothing adharmic about it, because he is using a weak point of Bhishma. Now Bhishma drops his arms, what can Arjun do in that? If Bhishma says, no, I will not fight against Shikhandi, that is the problem of who? Bhishma. His strategy is used to find out that Ashwathama is the weakness of Drona. And the elephant also is called Ashwathama, his son is also called Ashwathama, so let us spread the rumor that Ashwathama is killed. And Drona doesn't believe anybody, he comes to ask Yudhishthir. And Yudhishthir, when they ask him, he says Ashwathama hataha narahava kunjarahava. When he is saying that, Bhagavan blows the conch. What is wrong in that? Is it cunning? Why can't Drona increase his hearing power? Number one. Hey, don't laugh, I am telling you. Number two, let the conch be blown now. Will it be blown eternally? After that he could have asked, now again you please tell me, who died? What prevented him from asking second time? He wants to sit down in his chariot, and by the way, he took samadhi before even Drishtadyumna came and cut off his head. He departed from his body straight away. What is fault of Krishna in that, you tell me? Is that not smartness? It's only smartness. Did he prevent Dronacharya saying, no, you can't ask question again now? No, you let him ask second time. What is the problem? Like that there are enough reasons. In my opinion, Bhagwan has not compromised, because if Bhagwan compromised, then he had no right to give the knowledge of the Gita and tell Arjun that you have to follow Karma Yoga, where the purity of the means is as important as the goal. So it is not just efficiency, somehow get the work done. No. You have to follow the righteous means. Only then it is Karma Yoga, otherwise it is not. And it is not merely serving the family or the country or any other cause. So many people say that I don't do puja, I don't do worship, I don't go to temple, but I do my duty in the family, Swamiji, so that is worship of the Lord only. But do we do it as worship of the Lord? We do it only, it's our obligatory duty. Yesterday we saw that it is my Nitya Karma and Naimittik Karma. I have to do that. Just by doing that, it doesn't become Karma Yoga. So what exactly is Karma Yoga? Even if I am serving my country, it is a part of my duty because I am benefiting so much from the country. So in Vedanta, we say Karma Yoga, Karma transforms into Karma Yoga because of these 2 points. One is any action that unites us with the divine, that is Karma Yoga. When it is done with the bhavana that this is done for the Lord, with that Ishwar Arpana Buddhi, then it becomes Karma Yoga. So if I serve my family with the bhavana that I am serving Bhagwan, then it becomes Karma Yoga. I am talking in the strict sense of the word Karma Yoga. Better than selfish karma is to have little selfless karma and go here, there, do whatever selfless service or be selfless in a relationship. No doubt in that. But from the actual understanding and definition of Karma Yoga as per the Gita and the scriptures, this is the meaning. That any action done with the attitude that I am worshipping the divine or I am doing this for the Lord, that dedication, it makes it Karma Yoga proper. So it is not just mere actions, it is an attitude. An attitude of what? These 2 things. Ishwar Arpana, that I offer this to the Lord. That's why even if a puja is done, at the end of the puja we say, Anena Guru Paduka Puja Nena Shri Guru Priyatam Om Tat Sat Brahmarpanamastu. Offer it to Bhagavan. Or Kayena Vacha Manasendriyairva Buddhyatmana Va Prakrite Svabhavat Karomi Yadyat Sakalam Parasmai Narayanayeti Samarpayami. Then I offer it. That dedication transforms karma into Karma Yoga. Sometimes it may not be that we are so conscious while doing the action, so at least by the end of the action I can dedicate it. Or at the end of the day, that whatever I have done today, O Lord, I dedicate it unto you. This is all your glory only. So one is the sense of dedication, and second is reduction of the ego. Ishwar arpitam nechaya kritam. Not done to boost my ego. Real Karma Yoga is that which helps us to reduce our ego and make us more and more secure and peaceful within. That is called Chitta Shuddhi. Chitta Shodhakam Mukti Sadhakam. This is said in Upadeshar by Ramana Maharshi. So here now we are going to see, based on the Gita, the basic principle of Karma Yoga is this: Ishwararpitam Nechaya Kritam. But in the Gita is a nice elaboration which is there. So we are going to split these two main principles into 10. And these 10 principles of Karma Yoga is what we are going to see. First and foremost, in the Gita, Bhagavan says in 3rd chapter, Niyatam Kuru Karmatvam. Arjun, you must perform your obligatory duties diligently and cheerfully. Not that I have to do my duty, chalo abhi karo aur kya. Diligently and cheerfully. A person who cannot enjoy one's duties cannot go deep in meditation. And so those who say that spirituality is an escape from one's own duty, and if some people are using it that way, then they are not growing actually spiritually. Otherwise Arjuna would have been told by Bhagavan, chalo bhag ja, ja. Go away into the forest. You want to meditate? Go. No. He said, you stay here and you have to fight the war. If you don't fight the war, you will incur sin by going away into the forest, because you are running away from your duty. Never does spirituality tell us run away from the duty and seek the higher. Never. At the maximum, it will only say that if you are really an adhikari for that, then you have left the lower duty for a higher duty, which will eventually benefit everyone, because it is not escapism, it is a fact. Like a scientist who is really in love with his or her subject and has that much of in-depth knowledge or capacity to do research, will require time to go away from one's daily routine things and specifically focus in the laboratory, do the research, and the results which come out will benefit him, will benefit the society. So it is important to perform one's obligatory duties and do it diligently. In the obligatory duties, if there is any tamas, if there is any lethargy, I don't like to do it, then the same thing will affect us in the spiritual practice also. So our work actually becomes a means to also evaluate our own spiritual growth and whether I am ready for meditation or not. If I am having any sort of lethargy in my daily work, I should tighten that up. I should do it diligently. What must be done at the right time should be done at the right time. What effort it requires, that much effort should be put into this. There should not be compromise in that. Gurudev always said, work is love made visible. You love that work, it will be visible through your actions. One incident in his life was that early morning he used to get up and write letters. 4:30, 5, and for 1 hour he will sit and write letters. So there will be some people who will serve him some tea in the morning. There was one place where a committee member was there who has been serving Gurudev for a long time. So that committee member, he brought the tea, and that day there was, in the saucer, there was one drop of tea which had fallen. There is a cup, saucer, and he gave the tea. And Gurudev looked at it and he said, do you think I am in a railway platform? Take it back. Why he said that? To that person who has been there in the mission for so long, he would expect that person to be diligent in the duty and not be careless that somehow fill the tea and just come and give it. And in fact, he used to say that every work that we do is his work. Sometimes when he used to write the letter and give, there would be somebody sitting down there waiting to do some seva. So he would give the letter to them and they have to put it in the envelope and then seal it and write the address. And once they do that, before it gets posted, he will see. There was one person who wrote him a letter, young man. He wrote him a letter and Gurudev would reply. His efficiency also was such that in those times, post was also very efficient. So if you write a letter, in 3 days time you will get a reply from Gurudev. Maximum 5 days. If there is a delay after 5 days, because he used to travel, so sometimes the letter will reach him in the place after he has left the place. So then from there they will send it to the next place. It will go like that. So he will write in the letter that your letter has reached me only today after traveling these places, and hence the delay in the reply. One letter came to him, youngster wrote him a letter. And Gurudev replied to the letter, first line begins like this: received your undated letter. And you see the next line he wrote after that: you are a young man going to start your business. Dates are very important to you. You should not be so careless about dates. Just see the small thing. But he taught him that you are starting your own business. How can you be so careless about dates? Because you will sign contracts. You will have timelines. You will have to finish it on time. You cannot be so careless about dates. So whatever is my duty, I must do it diligently. That is the first step of Karma Yoga. And today you see our country, one of the reasons why we are in the state where we are is because we have a chalta hai attitude for everything. Chalta hai, kaise bhi kar lo, khatam karo isko. Then it is not Karma Yoga. So perform the obligatory duties diligently and cheerfully. First step of Karma Yoga. Second, dedicate that duty to a higher cause. Highest is the Lord. The higher the cause, greater will be the inspiration. That's what Gurudev always used to say. That you dedicate it to a higher purpose. It can be very ordinary thing. Like I am studying. But I can study because I want to be a great man. I want to achieve great things. I want to leave a mark in the world. Or I can study saying that in this field I want to take that field to the next level and benefit the society. Or I can study with the attitude that in this field I will take my country to the top. It depends on what is my bhavana behind. So the higher is my dedication, the altar of dedication, the greater will be the inspiration also. And so dedicate the duties to a higher purpose. I can do jogging with the attitude that Diwali party is coming. And when I reduce weight, I will become so slim. People can't believe that it is you. How did you lose so many kilos? I can do it with that attitude. Or it is the duty to keep the body fit and fine. Let me do it. Or body is a tool for sadhana. Let me do it so that the body has enough pranic energy and I can go deep in my meditation. It can be different bhavanas towards. The higher the altar of dedication, the greater will be the inspiration. I mean, there is nothing wrong if you do it even for yourself. But the joy of dedicating it to something higher and something selfless is very different. Please come. So dedicate the duties to a higher cause or to God. Always keep the vision high. One is in action and in bhavana I dedicate. Other is in my vision, it should be high. I should not be thinking about ordinary type of things. Only profit. How much did I get finally? That's all that matters. That also matters, no doubt, but that cannot be the only thing that matters. Our Guruji says a very nice thing. He says that the love of wealth has made the wealth of love disappear from our lives. Wealth is so loving and important to us that we sacrifice relationships, we sacrifice so many greater things of life. Respect. How sometimes people talk to each other. All because of ego, because of wealth, power, position. So the vision should not be on small, ordinary things. Gurudev used to classify people into 4 categories. He would say laborer. Who is a laborer? not somebody who just does physical actions and physical manual labor. Anybody who thinks only about himself and his profits and what did he get or she get and is not bothered about anything else is a laborer. He may be a CEO, he may be a big officer, maybe a big minister, whoever that person may be, who thinks only about I, is a laborer only. Second person is a worker. Who is a worker? A person who wants to serve people, whose vision is not limited to only I, but who wants to make a difference to people around, who wants to have some selflessness and who wants to serve the society, make a difference, make a better society around, and genuinely, not for recognition. That's why he used to say that there is no expression called social laborer. There is an expression which is called social worker. Why? Because he is interested in serving the society. So laborer is the first one, worker is the second one. Third is the achiever. A man of achievement who has actually gone beyond the limitations of the ego and has achieved fulfillment in life, not just success. That person is a real achiever. And fourth is a visionary leader who can create such people, who actually can inspire people to go beyond their selfishness and live selflessly and attain fulfillment. So let the vision be high, not only on profit and not only on what did I get, how much did I benefit. In fact, the very question, sometimes new people, sometimes they ask in their innocence, and nothing wrong about it. The question is, if I come to Vedanta, what will I get? So you should say at that time that you will get purity of mind, concentration, tips for stress-free living, all that one should say. But the real answer is you will not get anything in Vedanta. If you come, you will lose your ego and you will get infinity. That's the real answer actually. But you tell that to the person first time, the person will not come only. So you have topics, the people give us topics, Vedanta and the secret of large profits. Vedanta and vegetarianism. Vedanta and harmony in relationships. Vedanta can deal with quite a few things, no doubt, but the real purpose of Vedanta is let the person go beyond this small little shell in which one is trapped. We will see a small video of Gurudev on this, that what he spoke when he said, keep the vision high. This is from the Gita, 2nd chapter.
Durena hyavaram karma sweating and toiling and your actions, your selfish actions, prompted by your ego and ego-centric selfish desires, in which the millions are sweating and toiling from morning till evening. That karma, it is only prompted by instincts and impulses. It is like animals suffering or running about. It is pure labor. It is not the man of achievement. Mere laborers. Durena, by far lesser, is this unnecessary sweating and toiling in the world outside, complaining of the tension, stress and strain of life. That is not real work. Work is inspired work. Where the work worker never understands tiredness, exhaustion. The joy of that work itself replenishes the true worker. Durena Hyavaram.
You know why Gurudev said the doctor has to take ECG to find out whether I am overstrained or not? His heart was working only 16%. In 16% heart, last few years of his life, this is the talk he has given. Can we believe? What a roaring talk. That's the power of inspiration and power of selflessness. The idea what he was trying to say is important, that when we are inspired by it, that work itself is the joy. And keep that vision very high. Not that we should never reach the goal, but what he said is that striving to reach the goal, that is where the growth happens, because something which motivates and inspires me all the time. So keep the vision very high. Third point. Fourth, reduce self-importance and self-projection. That is real spiritual growth. Silent work where there is no projection that I did it, I must be recognized. Even in a spiritual organization, when one comes, if one really wants to evolve, one doesn't bother about projection. Otherwise one does small little thing and then one wants recognition for that. Swamiji, do you see that flower was there? I made it. Oh, very good. Not that one should not be feeling good about it. You feel good about it, but sometimes people feel neglected. Array, with so much effort I made this flower vase and Swamiji did not even say it was good. Then there is a problem. I am giving you a small example, but in our family life, in our work life, everywhere, what is the big issue? Issue is this: I was not given importance, I was not remembered, I was ignored. And what suffers in that is either the project or the harmony in the family. Next time I won't do, go. Why? Because this time I was not recognized. So then that is because the issue is that the work is not the joy. The joy is coming from the praise, from the recognition. So reduce that self-importance, reduce that self-projection, then that becomes real karma yoga. And love the very work itself. As Gurudev said in his talk, that a really inspired person loves the very action. That person doesn't have stress, worry, anxiety, because one loves what one is doing. To tell that person to stop doing that, that person will be in misery. Because the person is in love with that. Somebody who loves music and enjoys playing music doesn't bother about how much praise comes, how many people are ready to listen. He enjoys and does it. So love the very work itself. So one must ask oneself that, do I really love the work that I am doing? Then the mind will be at peace, there will be creativity, there will be balance, there will be many new things which will come up, and that journey itself is enjoyable. And such a work will definitely reduce the ego. So love the very work and do not insist on particular results only. We may expect a goal that we have seen earlier, but we need not insist that this has to happen in this time, because we saw the third law of karma says that the results are governed by time and cosmic laws. It will come, the result will come. Nobody can snatch away from me what I really deserve, and nobody can give me what I don't deserve. How hard I may try to get it, if I don't deserve it, it will not come to me. And just because it is not coming to me right now also doesn't mean that I don't deserve it. It may come in time. Let me put the effort. If that is what I need to seek, it will come. So insistence on particular result is the sign of a person who is very attached. Karma Yogi's sign would be to accept the results cheerfully as his prasad. So Ishwar Arpana Buddhi, while doing the action, dedicate it to the Lord, and when the results come, accept it as prasad. The literal meaning of prasad is that because of which the mind becomes completely quiet. Sad means to sit. Prasad means to sit. The mind settles down completely. So that because of which the mind becomes completely calm and quiet. That is called as prasada. Manaprasada saumyatvam, it is said. Let the mind be very, very calm and steady. How that comes about? The moment I accept whatever has come, whatever result is there, my mind is peaceful and happy. There is no conflict. Why this to me? I didn't want this. Still why this has come to me? None of that. That's why in the temple when one goes and the pujari gives the prasad, what do we do? Accept it. Think it has come from the Lord and consume it if it has to be consumed. Somebody is given a peda, somebody is given some vibhuti, somebody is given a tulsi leaf, somebody is given some water. Does anybody crib saying कि उसको पेड़ा दिया मुझे तुलसी दिया क्यों? मुझे भी तुलसी मत दो मुझे भी पेड़ा दो. There may be some people who crib also. But the point is when we accept it, okay, this has come from Bhagavan. My mind is peaceful. That is called prasad. The mind becomes completely quiet because of acceptance. So all the results come to us from the Lord. Let us remember this very clearly. People are only instruments. Things and situations are only instruments around us. Actually it comes to us from Bhagavan. It's like the courier, The person who gives the courier to us, will you get angry with that person? Who is the person who is behind that? Is the sender. So my communication is with the sender. That person is only a delivery boy. Same way, results come to us from Bhagavan because Bhagavan is the karma phala data. And first day we saw that we are presenting our blueprint to the Lord by our desires, our thoughts. Bhagavan only executes it. So the results come from Him. And so if I know the secret of action, if I know the laws around me, if I know to make my mind single pointed and quiet and I am striving to attain something, that much more better. Acceptance also will be there in my life. So results come. When results come, accept them with humility and with equanimity. That is what is Karma Yoga. It is not only in action. How equanimous am I when the results come? And equanimity does not mean not getting disturbed only when unfavorable results come. Equanimity is at all times. Even when favorable results come, I don't get extremely elated. And even when unfavorable results come, I don't get completely depressed. And both these go hand in hand. One cannot choose. One cannot say that in success, let me be elated and excited. Failure, I will handle it with equanimity. That can't happen. They both come together. So either both come together or none of them come. So one has to be peaceful in both. That's why the next principle is one is calm before the action, during the action and after the action. So equanimity of the mind, that's why it is defined as yoga. In Gita it is said samatvam yoga uchyate. Two definitions of yoga are there in the Gita, in the second chapter. One is yoga karmasu kaushalam. Dexterity in action is yoga. And the other definition is samatvam yoga uchyate. And they both appear to be different. And how can somebody be very dexterous and efficient in action and yet be calm? Actually they both go together only. Only a calm mind can actually be dexterous in action and perform that action skillfully with the sense of dedication. So if I am a karma yogi, I can measure whether I am really a karma yogi by this, that before the action am I inspired, during the action am I concentrating, after the action am I detached, then only my mind will be calm. Otherwise the mind will be turbulent. In the daily world, in the desire prompted activity, when I am working, Before the action, what is there? Before the action, there is desire, there is agitation. While the action is happening, there is tension. And after the action is over, there is worry, pata nahi kya aayega. That is ordinary way of working, which dissipates the energy. A karma yogi is one who conserves the energy because remains calm throughout, during the action, before the action, and this we have to train ourselves. This can happen by constantly telling ourselves, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Be peaceful. And really deeply if we go, it happens when I have surrendered. So that's why the next point is, know that you are only an instrument and not the doer. I am only an instrument. In the Gita, Bhagavan says that in the 11th chapter, that Arjun, don't think that if you go away from this battlefield, these people will be spared. I have already killed them. You only be an instrument and you attain all the glory and the fame and the success that comes with it. Because you are only an instrument. But know that the real doer is me. Nimitta matram bhava savya sachin. And only in one place in the Gita this comes. Because to live in this standpoint requires complete surrender. At all times I am only an instrument. Don't insult somebody and get angry on somebody and say, I am only an instrument. Bhagavan is the doer. At all times I am the instrument. Even in success I am only an instrument. He is the real doer. There's a very nice line I read about the game of chess. The game of chess, it is said, the king and the pawn go back to the same box at the end of the game. The king and the pawn go back to the same box. What gives the king the power of a king is the player. And how the player utilizes that king. What gives the pawn that power is the player. Suppose they change the position. The bishop is used as a horse, horse is used as a bishop. What prevents that person from changing the position? Nothing. So then the bishop and the horse. So the bishop will start going 3 squares and the horse will start going that diagonal. Is that the person using it? So we all are instruments. The most effective way to drop stress is this. I am only an instrument. Otherwise, how much stress we have? Because I am the doer. I have to show results. I have to show my performance. I have to get promotion. And that energy goes away. Half the energy goes because I am so stressed before action only. Because I have to do, I have to do, I have to do. This doesn't absolve me from my duties, but it makes me free. As an instrument, whatever has to be done has to be done. But I am not the doer. When I have surrendered fully, I become free. No stress. It's like that example, there was one person who was traveling in the train and this person was sitting in the on the seat and there is a suitcase on his head. So the ticket checker comes there and he is asking the tickets, and so this person also shows the tickets, and then this person with the suitcase, so the TC says, why are you carrying the suitcase? So he says, my luggage is down here, that is the permissible luggage, which is 40 kilos. This extra 15 kilos I have on my head because I want to carry that. He said, hello, but you have to pay extra for it, this extra luggage. He said, no, train is not carrying, I am carrying. But who is carrying the train? Who is carrying him? He is carrying the train. It's just like that. Now we have the burden of doership on our head. I am doing. In the flow of life, Bhagavan is doing each and everything. Everything. If we are having this experience, it's because the Lord is the doer. Bhagwan inspired so many people to organize. We are having this experience. He inspired all of you to come. He inspired me to come. And he is only inspiring me to talk. He is inspiring you to sit quietly and listen. He is only doing each and everything. Through us, the instrument is each of us. And is it not a joy to be the instrument in the hands of the Lord? A person who is a devotee would think like that Bhagwan is using me and what more do I need? Person who has ego will think that if Bhagwan is the doer, then what is my role? That is the beauty, that you don't have a role. You are in hands of the Lord all the time. Complete unburdening happens. No ego at all. No worry, because He will take care of everything. And such people, you see, they will achieve great things effortlessly. Why? Because there is no block in their mind that I am doing, that block is gone. Effortlessly things flow through that mind. Great things also happen if they have to happen. If they don't have to happen, the person is quiet. There is no anxiety in the mind of that person. Completely stress free. So I am only an instrument. You know why the flute is the dearest to the Lord? Even Radhaji does not get that much time that the flute gets. And it is said that Radhaji is always jealous of the flute. Because the flute is there at all times with the Lord. Why? Because the flute is empty. So the moment one becomes empty, as one always says that the music needs the emptiness of the flute. The sun needs the emptiness of a window to see through. Words require the emptiness of the paper on which you write. Same way, the Lord requires emptiness of the self. That empty oneself completely. And the Lord manifests. In each of us right now also the Lord is only manifesting. But to the extent is my surrender, to that extent the Lord manifests. And in complete surrender, 100% Lord manifests. And when a person becomes that way, living with that attitude that I am only an instrument, Bhagwan is the doer, the greatest result comes to that person. And what is that? That person realizes that I am one with the Lord. Because when the ego is gone fully, that is when the person awakens to realize oneness. In love there is no ego. There is complete identification with the beloved. So a devotee who surrenders that I am not the doer. The height of karma yoga is that. If I say that I am a karma yogi, do I feel empty? Do I feel that I am only an instrument? The Lord is the doer at all times, in everything. Then I am actually a karma yogi. Karma yoga is not just what we saw earlier, not just some doing action and some social service. That may begin that way. But it must lead to all these. Acceptance of results, calmness during, before, after, surrender of the ego. So know that we are only an instrument, not the doer. And finally, because I am only an instrument and not the doer, why should I attach my worth with my work? The way of the world is that your work determines your worth. If you don't perform, you will be fired. But in Vedanta it is said that your work does not determine your worth. You are a worthy individual no matter what you do, what you achieve, because divinity is your own nature. Bliss is your own nature. And centered in that, if I act, why will I not achieve what I want to achieve? I will achieve everything. And I don't have to fluctuate with my achievement. That when I achieve success, then I go up. When I achieve failure, I go down. I don't have to fluctuate. I can remain steady. These things come and go. So these are 10 principles of Karma Yoga. And how from Karma to Karma Yoga, when I follow this journey, not only I exhaust my existing karmas, I don't build new karmas. That's the foundation of Karma Yoga. We saw on the first day that selfishness strengthens the karmic bondage and selflessness weakens the karmic bondage. So the more selfless I am in my vision, in my attitude, and the more surrendered I have been, the lesser is the karmic influence. So I don't create new karmas, I allow existing ones to get exhausted, and such a person has a very calm and quiet mind. And meditating on the truth, the person becomes free. Hence, Karma Yoga is the first step. Practicing Karma Yoga, make oneself ready, then comes Dhyana Yoga, and meditating on the self, one is liberated. So this is where we stop. There are a few questions which are here. We will answer these questions. This is from one person called Mr. Brog, B-R-O-G. Is that person here? I am asking because if the person is not here, then I won't answer the question. Right. There is no name on this. How does one identify one's Swadharma? Is the person here who was asked? Okay. So, there are a few ways to understand. One is that work in which one is absorbed the most, doing which one is absorbed the most. If you know it from childhood, or if you know that this is what interests me a lot, then choose that. Otherwise, one has to do some experimenting also and find out that work in which my mind can get absorbed fully. If money is not a compulsion, what will I do? That is another way. Third is, if you analyze from childhood, every 5 years, you write down what are the things that interested you the maximum. From the age of 0 to 5, from 6 to 10, from 11 to 15, 16 to 20. And invariably you will find that there is a certain link which is there, which sometimes we have ignored because of maybe financial pressures or peer pressure or family pressure, different reasons. So find out what am I really made for through that introspection. Doing which, the third way to know is that doing that work, maximum potential comes out and I don't worry about the result. Being in that field, I can serve the society maximum. These are a few ways to understand, and the best way to understand is by observing one's own self, that one can identify one's own Swadharma. Where the joy is in the work itself, the joy is not in the result. Then one is made for that. You can take the help of some tests and counseling and whatever else also, but more of it is through one's own thinking. Miss Nehal Chavan, is she here? Right. So this is my first time I have come to this mission. My question to you is, how can a person change drastically? Because a person is abided by his habits and it takes 30 days to build one and break two. It is true that habits are very strong and it takes time to build up and it takes time to break them also and to change. So the drastic change, see, sometimes the drastic change happens because it's a very strong jolt which comes to a person which has that capacity to break the power of habit. Like the example that we gave, Ratnakar transformed into Valmiki because the jolt was very powerful, that he suddenly realized that I am alone and I have to face the consequences all by myself. Now remember, that very moment he did not transform. That was a big wake up call to him and he woke up to realize certain deeper truths of life. It took him a lot of hard work and practice because the past habits of being a looter, a murderer, a plunderer won't leave him so easily. So he was not able to say even the word Ram. What was he saying? Mara, because his habits have conditioned his mind so much that he can only think of violence. His mind will not, see, we should not take it literally that he could not say Ram. It's not verbally he could not say Ram. What it means that his mind could not fix in Ram and those thoughts of violence kept on coming to him. So it definitely takes time. But always remember, what can be done can also be undone. It requires conviction. I always give this formula for any change to happen. Any change is equal to clarity plus conviction plus courage plus consistency. 4 aspects are required. I must have the clarity that why I want to change and what do I want to change to. Not only I must have intellectual clarity, I must have conviction that yes, I need to change this. There is no two ways about it. But that is not enough. I must have the courage to say no to my mind, which will go back into the past habits. I must say no and reinforce the stronger and the new habit that I want to cultivate. And last, I must be consistent. As she has written, 30 days it takes, then the new one also will take. Sometimes it takes time, that much time, sometimes it takes lesser time if you are so intensely wanting it, but it will take consistency. Sometimes we have clarity and we have courage, but we don't have consistency. Very clear that jogging should be done. Convinced about it, has the courage also, and 4 times told the mind no and got up for 4 days. And next 3 days said, "Abhi 4 दिन तो किया ना, ये हफ्ते के लिए बहुत है, बस सो जाओ." Then gone, it won't happen. So yes, it is very difficult to change, no doubt, but human being has the power to change, and it all depends on one's intensity and the effort that one puts in. Mr. Gautam, is he here? Not here. Equal and opposite. Equal I can understand. Study hard and you get good results. Marks are equal to effort put in. Please explain opposite. Karma theory did not say opposite. Newton said equal and opposite. You should ask Newton. Why did he say equal and opposite? In my understanding, opposite is said because any work you do, there will also be a certain resistance. I forgot the definition of work. What is the definition of work in physics? Force by displacement something.
Yes, force done by displacement. Force into displacement.
Force into displacement. No. So if you want to move something, you need to put that force, and then when that thing gets displaced, that thing will put a resistance to your force. That is inertia.
No,
that
sir.
object is in inertia.
Yes.
And you have to, it has its own inertia, right. So in the same way, my understanding it can be limited also, you can explore and know further. But any karma that we do, there will be some resistance which comes from life. So the result also will be limited by that. So one say equal and opposite. But otherwise, what Vedanta we say that the result will come according to the laws of the nature, and whatever karma you do, your attitude, the intention matters maximum, not just the external force. S. Lakshmi from Vashi, is the person here? Okay. Vedanta mainly teaches all to drop the ego and merge with the whole, the cosmic level. So when we discussed about free will, are we not boosting our ego? When we talk from the cosmic level, where is the place for free will? It is true that from the absolute cosmic level there is no place for free will, because that free will also is determined in the cosmic intelligence. But the question to understand, the point to understand here is, can I live at that cosmic level? At all times, am I able to live beyond this ego, identifying with the Supreme Lord at the cosmic level? Then when I live at the cosmic level, then there is no question of fate, free will, obviously it's all gone. Because I don't even see choice. Till I see choice, till I perceive choice, I have to put my free will to ensure that I am putting the maximum efforts to make the right choice, because that choice is only going to make everything. That's why in the Gita predetermination comes only once, that Arjun, you be only an instrument, I have already killed these people. Because to live at that level of predetermination, that everything is predetermined, I have no free will at all, is not easy. That requires 100% surrender. No, but I don't believe that everything is predetermined. I'll give you an example. When we see the movie, it appears that the characters are making the choice, right? But are the characters actually making the choice? The director is already destined, the script writer is already destined that what this character has to say. Suppose a character makes his own choice and makes his own dialogue. What will the director say? Cut! Shoot again. So it appears that there is a free will. From highest standpoint, there is no free will, there is only an appearance of free will. Remember that. But the question to know is, the point to know is that am I able to live at that standpoint at all times? That is not possible. But what is possible is, if I use my free will and I keep doing my purushartha and keep reducing my ego, I can reach that level which is beyond fate and free will, where surrender comes about. So till that level is not reached, one must keep putting the effort. The most practical thing I have ever heard about this whole topic is, while doing the action, make your best choice. After the action is over, whatever result comes, know that your choice was also predetermined and the result also is predetermined. While making the choice, don't think that it is predetermined, because then you don't know what is predetermined. So how will you choose? So while choosing, use your free will. After choosing, know that that choice was also predetermined, so don't feel guilty about it. And that's what Bhagavan Ram said to Kaikeyi and to Manthara. Kaikeyi was very, very unhappy and miserable when she realized that, oh God, what have I done? And she went to the forest to request Bhagavan Ram that please come back. And look at the greatness of Lord Ram. He went to Kaikeyi first and prostrated to her even before he went to Kaushalya. He had no grudge in his heart against Kaikeyi at all. And Kaikeyi was feeling very sad. And Bhagavan Ram tells her that time that don't feel sad. What had to happen only has happened. You are only an instrument. But you are at that point in time, this had to happen through you. It has happened, don't worry. And when he returned after 14 years, Manthara was terrified that Ram is going to come and kill me, sentence me to death. And first thing Bhagavan Ram does after meeting Bharat, first thing he does is goes to Manthara. And Manthara doesn't want to come in front of Lord Ram. He goes seeking Manthara, finds her, goes there and gives her a hug without any grudge in his mind, without saying that why did you do this to me? Nothing. And Manthara was so touched at that time because she said that what is this? What have I done to this person and what is he giving me in return? It's so much of unconditional love. And he told Manthara that you are only an instrument, you are not the doer. What had to happen had to happen. Now don't worry about it, it's over, gone. So while doing the action, know that I have to choose and Bhagavan has given me the choice, so make the best choice. That time don't say jo hona hoga wahi hoga, mere choice karne se kya hota hai, kuch bhi kar lenge. No. That time make the best choice, and then whatever is the result that comes, accept it with the understanding that this choice was also determined, the result also is determined. Mr. Satish Rao, see here, right. Assuming that animals do not have karma, what is the purpose of some of us humans being reborn as animals when the karmic dynamics would be on a pause? See, the purpose of the Manushya Yoni is called Karma Yoni. Human species or human life is the life in which we can exhaust karma faster and get out of the cycle of birth and death. In no other yoni one can go into. One can do this. In the animal yoni, new karmas are on a pause. But the existing karmas, because of which the animal yoni is being taken, those karmas are getting exhausted. No? Why do we say in the animal yoni there is no new karma which is being generated? Because you see the definition of karma. Karma is equal to action done by BMI plus intention plus doership. Now, animal does not have a conscious doership. Animal does not have a conscious intention. But action is still happening. And the cause of that action is the karma which has been done in the past, because of to exhaust which one has taken the animal birth. So, animal birth, not only animal birth, any birth, except human birth, plant, bird, animal, even the higher births, Devatas, Gandharva, Yaksha, Kinnara, if at all you believe they exist, then in all these births, these yonis are only called Bhoga yoni. They will only exhaust karma, they will not build new karma. So exhaustion of karma happens. Otherwise, why should I be born as an animal? There is no reason to be born as an animal. No? The reason why I am born is because I have already done some karma. I have to just enjoy that fruits. That's why it is called Bhoga yoni. And to enjoy those fruits, I need a particular body. So at this point in time, it's an animal's body or a plant body or whatever it is. So in all those yonis, karma exhaustion happens. But new karmas are not created. After committing a wrong, Raji, is she here? After committing a wrong act, we repent and ask for forgiveness. Will the wrong act be added to our karma? If yes, what is the benefit of asking for forgiveness? Okay, so we explained in the law of karma, there is an external result and there is a internal result, right? Two results are created, visible and invisible. So the visible result is already created, it has been set into motion by your karma. If I have hurt somebody, I have cheated somebody, I have done whatever I have done, now that action has been set into motion. Now I realize that it is wrong. So I seek forgiveness. Again, externally I have done action to seek forgiveness. But the action which has been done first has already been set into motion, that will give a certain external result which I cannot avoid. My seeking forgiveness, what will it do? Two things it will do. First and foremost, the impression that is created when I did that wrong karma, that impression will get negated. Because now I have accepted that that was wrong. If I have not sought the forgiveness and I have not accepted it as wrong, then that impression can create further similar type of action, because I have not corrected myself. And not only I have not corrected, I have justified that this is fine. So one is, it will create that. Second is, the moment I understand it as wrong, the guilt which comes with that also goes away. When I say, I am sorry, please forgive me, the guilt also will go away. So it is for me to free myself. That's why we always say that forgive and forget and be free. So when I forgive and I forget, I don't hold on to that memory, because I have sought forgiveness and it's over. Guilt also gone, wrong tendency to repeat that also gone. But externally what result has to come, that cannot be avoided, because that action is already set into motion. But when the result comes, my mind is calm, peaceful, and whatever result will come externally, one will bear it very graciously. Fine, I did this karma, it has come to me, let me accept it. That doesn't matter. So that's why forgiveness plays a very important role subjectively to free myself. And it is more to free myself actually. It is not about other person. Last is not a question, it is a thesis of question. Mr. Rajesh Chandra Chod, is the person here? Okay, thank you. So 4 questions are there, we'll do. I have already determined the result Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita and Bible as such. thy will prevails. This make the action more difficult to perform if results are determined. Yeah, but I don't know what the results are determined. So I have to make the choice to the best of my capacity. In that case of Arjun, Bhagwan was there only to assure him that whether he is there or not, war will still happen and these people will get killed. So he knew the result that they are going to win. Because Bhagwan told him from his standpoint, because he showed him the Vishwarup. But that way we don't know what is the result going to come. So for us it is still a suspense. And hence when we make a choice, we have to make the choice to the best of our capacities, because also understand that we are still instruments. It is not that we are zero. I am not the doer, but I am still an instrument. No? And that instrument has to make the choice. Through the instrument only the Lord is functioning. Hence, this is to be understood in that light. How to identify inspired action? Which verse in Bhagavad Gita can we identify one's passion, daily work, as this would allow one to work with full energy? So you should go through chapter 3 and chapter 18. In these you will find the description of Swadharma, Karma Yoga, and specifically in chapter 18 there are few verses which briefly give us, in our culture there are 4 different broad classifications of temperament. Those who are creative, research oriented, very contemplative, they are called as the Brahmanas. Those who are leaders, those who are warriors, those who are people who can protect strong people, they are the Kshatriyas. Those who can do business very well, who are entrepreneurs, who can know where to invest, what returns to get, the Vaishyas. And those who are able to do this manual type of work, they are the Shudra. Now none of these are superior or inferior. Bhagavan says very very clearly, Sve sve karmani abhirataha samsiddhim labhate naraha. 18th chapter he says that engaging in the work that each one is made for, a person will attain the supreme. So it is not that Shudra is lower. Shudra also will attain that supreme only through that work that the person is doing by offering it to the Lord. So now I have to find out which temperament I belong to, and then that's a broad classification, and then in that you have to find out which specific profession one belongs to. I may be a creative person, but now I am creative in which field? In writing, in acting, in drawing, in music, in which field? So then that I have to do my introspection and find out. So 18th chapter will give you the broad understanding. When we consider the worst and perform the action, majority of the times the results are good. But is it that thinking about the worst result and preparing is negative thinking? No. If all the time I am scared and I keep thinking about the worst, then that is negative thinking. But there are some times when there is fear in the mind. And how do you overcome that fear? Or there is anxiety in the mind or tension. How do you overcome that? So then one of the things that popular psychology or the motivational theories, they will tell you is, imagine what is the worst that can happen, and if you can deal with it, then you are fine, so that that fear will go away. Because fear always works in 2 ways, in 2 steps, not 2 ways, in 2 steps. One is I don't know, because future is uncertain, so I don't know. And the moment I don't know, then the what if game starts. What if this happens? What if that happens? So then fear starts building up, because the negative imagination starts. Now to arrest that, one is told to think in certain terms, that this is the worst that can happen. Am I able to handle that? If I can handle that, then I don't have to be scared. So it is only a means to make that person settle down from uncertainty and the what if game that the mind plays. It is not that one should constantly think about what is the worst can happen, then that becomes a negative thinking. But on a specific issue, If the mind is very disturbed, then think what is the worst can happen and settle down. This is what the popular theory would say. In Vedanta we say a very simple point. Fear goes when you have faith and when you have inner strength, that whatever happens will happen for the good by His will, and I am ready to face it. And if I don't have the capacity to face it, I will learn, or may the Lord give me the capacity. That Shraddha and surrender will help us to go through. Last one. In training the subconscious mind, law of attraction followed world over, the end result is kept and visualized daily so that the result is 100%, especially for materialistic things, car, house, etc. Example, color of the car, model of car, keep visualizing, that will come into your life as per law of attraction. But in Bhagavad Gita, results are not in one's hand. How does this work then? It is said that everything happens twice in this world, once in your mind and then in the outer world. Rather, what would be the right way? So there are two levels. One level is the level of this law of attraction, where one says that keep on visualizing the result. What you visualize, that will materialize. Thoughts become things. Because the power of the single pointed mind is to manifest whatever it thinks. And it will happen. What we do is we do mutual cancellation of thought. That diminishes the power of the mind. This law of attraction level is to make the mind think only single pointedly, not to entertain any other contrary thought which will cancel the earlier thought. Simple example. I keep giving the same example just because it is familiar to everybody. You can use it in any context. If I want to get up in the morning at 6, I set the alarm for 6. If I have the single pointed determination that at 6 o'clock I will wake up and I visualize waking up at 6, I will wake up. But sometimes it is not like that. Even while setting the alarm, one part of my mind is saying, what a useless fellow you are. You think you can get up at 6 o'clock? That's not possible only. Try, let us see. So there is one part of the mind which is entertaining a contrary thought. Other part of the mind wants it. Now this division which is there in the mind, that doesn't allow the mind to work in harmony. This is what we call disintegration. So law of attraction says you don't entertain any contrary thought. In fact, go into the detailing. Whatever you think and you visualize, that will happen. Which Vedanta also will tell you. Through a single pointed mind, whatever you desire, you will attain it. That is one level. But the Gita is telling you us higher level by explaining to us that when you expect a result, yesterday or day before I used this formula, expect and accept. So when you expect a result, that is what the law of attraction is saying. You are expecting this result. So you are visualizing that all the time. But the law of attraction does not prepare me to face a disappointment. When it doesn't come after so much of visualization, then what do I do? That's what the Gita says, that understand that your effort is not the only thing which will materialize the result. No matter how strong your effort may be, there are cosmic forces. So you put in your best, do the best and leave the rest. So expect and accept. So Gita doesn't say don't expect a result. You expect a result, work hard towards it, visualize it, but also have the capacity to accept the result whatever comes. And if you think that the result is not satisfactory, you can even introspect, find out how to improve, and next time take corrective measures and do that. So with that we conclude for today. You can ask me individually because let everybody not wait. It is both. Swadharma also is about not profession only, one's field. Like suppose I am a homemaker, that is my Swadharma. It is not a profession. So then that is my temperament. Swadharma connects more to the temperament, and then there is a choice whether it is a profession or not. But it is more of a temperament of the mind. So I thank each and every one of you who have come here for the last 3 days, and you have been a very wonderful audience. Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.